If you want to be more intentional with your cinematography choices in 2026, this is for you. We're going to look at a film I shot, discuss what worked and what didn't, and how we'll do it better next time. So, this is Operation Dynamo, a film that means the world to me as it's a true story. It's my family story. It's a story of sacrifice and follows my great great uncle and an unlikely comrade through their escape from Dunkirk. So, I knew from day one that I didn't want the first shot to be during the war. The main theme of the film is about survivor's guilt and exploring the lifelong physical and mental damage of war. That's why I decided to open the film years later with a scene that really sets up Jack's isolation. He's now in this world full of colour and life, with everyone around him desperate to move on from the absolute misery of the war. But he is this kind of ghostly presence that doesn't really belong in this world. He's one of a countless number of soldiers who never really came back. I started with this slow dolly creep in to sort of ease us into his world. I wanted it to be a bit of a palate cleanser. Something ex-soldiers often say they struggle with when adapting back to civilian life is the quiet, the comfort, the stillness, after spending so many years living in a permanent state of stress. I wanted us to feel a bit of that, to really feel the silence and just sit with it for a second. After that opening, we're then hit with this expansive wide shot, with this tiny figure shown completely alone, and we really feel his isolation. The overhead practical fixtures are providing most of the ambient in the room, which my gaffer Will Fleming played about with until we got the ratios just right. Then we've got the 1200X, I think it was, that's on the stage, going through a focusing attachment to provide that dance floor spotlight. Since we're so wide and with a little bit of VFX trickery, it didn't matter that it's not exactly a period appropriate fixture. So all of this was shot and lit with a very minimal setup, as the whole film was self-funded for about 3k or so. We needed to move very fast. On set for these ballroom scenes, we've got about 5 people. I'm pulling focus myself, my gaffer is running around like a one-man army. He did an unbelievable job though, and I'm really happy with how these shots look. They're lit by a Nanlite 500 going through a light dome with the 2 layers of diffusion and then an extra strap to the outside. I would have much preferred to set up a cove, kind of bouncing into like an 8x8 of bleached muslin for like a bit of a more natural, less saucy look. That would have also given the actors more flexibility to move around the set while still being lit in the way I wanted. But since I knew they weren't going to be moving, we had to prioritize speed. Moving one stand with a light and softbox on it was far faster than stripping down the cove and then building it back up again when it was time to flip around for Jack's angle. We've then got a neg floppy overhead that's creating the kind of contrast on the side of her face, and an Aperture MC set to the same red colour as the practical ceiling lights as our motivated backlight. Finally, we've also got practical lamps on each table, which Matt, the production designer, sourced. They're just adding that little bit of background interest and creating layers in what could otherwise be quite flat shots, as I knew I wanted to shoot them with a shallow depth of field. Ideally, I wanted candles on the table so that we'd have kind of wax running down them and just have these natural flames, but of course, you know, it's a listed building. Naked flame was a bit of a no-go. Then for this next one, we didn't really have to change anything for Jax, I suppose. We kind of just did a 180 flip. This is one of my favourite shots of the film. We have the colour contrast like pulling our attention in towards them, but they are distinctly separated by the beam. Vi very much in it, but Jack just somewhere on the periphery. So Vi's shots are slightly tighter than Jack's at first, on the 75mm rather than the 50mm, as she's really our point of view character. She's what connects us to this slightly distant man. But through their conversation, we slowly move in towards Jack. I kept the cinematography really minimal in terms of angles. The performance is what's driving the story forward, and the way these two play the characters, it's just so mesmerising. We don't need to rely on cutting to maintain our interest. I was trying to follow the John Ford approach, where you shoot the shots you want for each moment rather than just covering the scene. Although I have to find a balance, as my partner Ellie was the editor, and safe to say she does not approve of the John Ford approach. So now that we've got to know Jack's character through the point of view of Vi, we shift focus and it very much becomes his film. With these shots, I'm trying to kind of visually tell the audience what kind of relationship they have. They're a loving couple and she's deeply supportive, but he's very much in his own world. He's not really seeing her. Although we can see that he does recognise the love and care and does appreciate it. And while, of course, she understands what he's going through, it's heartbreaking for her. There's a sadness to the way she moves and the way she kind of exits the frame. She's had some of the most precious years of her life stolen, and she just wants the person that she fell in love with back. We then hold this shot with a slow zoom in as we start to hear the sounds of Jack's memories until we transition into his flashback from 1940. It's funny, I really get what Sam Mendes means when he says you spend the rest of your career trying to build back up to the confidence you had when you started. As this whole next sequence, I deliberately underexposed to bake in this heavy grain texture so I couldn't be tempted to pretty it up later. I can't think, maybe it was Greg Fraser that I heard had done that, and funnily enough, it's exactly what Feed and Papa Michael did for A Complete Unknown, although obviously to very different degrees of success. Looking back, I think it's the right idea, it's cool, but there's a difference between the grain pattern of, say, like my Red Raptor and the grain pattern of the FX6, which I shot the 1940 scenes with. The FX6 is a brilliant camera, but there's a filmic quality to the grain of the Raptor or the Alexa or the Venice, which sadly the FX6 does not have. It just looks more like digital noise, which I then have to try and cover by adding more film grain in post. In theory, though, I do like the idea and the overall way kind of the scene shot, which was using the single source of an Aperture MC on flame mode to supplement the candlelight. From the moment we arrive in 1942, there's not a single locked off frame. I shot the whole thing on the shoulder, trying to emulate the feeling of films like kind of Jarhead, where we're down on the ground with them and we never get the luxury of breathing space afforded by a nice, pretty landscape drone shot. I think my only learnings for this scene would be to pump in way more level and darken in the grade. If you're not using an absolute top-of-the-line cinema camera, or if you are using something like the Venice or Raptor, go ahead and pump the ISO to bake in the grain and just ND down as needed, as long as you keep that ISO consistent throughout the film so that the grain pattern stays the same. I wish I'd also made that slash that's coming in. It's meant to be coming in from like a high window into the basement, but I wish I'd made it a bit bluer and used the gobo to make it more of a focused outline of a window as opposed to just sort of this wash. I think this next scene is pretty good. There's actually not much of a change about the way it's shot, but what I would do is bring in some big sources from outside to create long, raking shadows across the floor. It would have made it way more tense if we felt there was a chance the German soldiers might spot the movement and their shadows out of the corner of their eye. But on the budget level that we were working at, 1200s or 2400s were not going to happen, especially as we needed a cherry picker to get them through the stained glass windows, which I don't even know if it would have been possible with the location. But and with a bit of haze in the room, we'd have got these kind of incredible light shafts. It would have been such a cool visual link back to the spotlight in the ballroom, kind of highlighting the contrast between the world Jack inhabited in 1940 and the vastly different one he was in a few years later. I was pleased with this match cut though. It was a simple idea, but I think it works well at communicating that all of these events, the war, the ballroom, for Jack, they're happening simultaneously. He's both at home safe with Vi and fighting for his life in Dunkirk. He can never really escape it. This scene is fairly simple cinematography-wise. We're mainly just following the framework, keying from the far side at 45-degree angle to get some nice contrast, but there's still a little bit of key light reaching the cheek. We've then got some practicals kind of peppering the frame with some highlights to add depth. I think this was the last shot of the day, which I had to get while everyone else was packing up to get out of the location on time. So I'm annoyed I didn't bring in a backlight to separate him from the background. We had the perfect motivation with the lamps on the table too. I think it's just one of those things that gets cut for time. And one other thing, I wish we'd angled the key more up at him to better sell that it's coming from the lamp on the table. It's probably just because I've stared at it for so long, but I feel like I can tell that the key is coming from off camera right. I think we really nailed it in the close-up though, but I just wish that mid-shot had more of that angle. I do really like the ratios though. I pretty much never use any fill light. I think it's a very easy way to make something to look too glossy and fake. And I quite like contrast the images anyway. Although next time, I wouldn't be against setting up a white sheet on a stand camera left and just testing bringing it in, just for a little bit of bounce to wrap around the other side of his face. And one thing I've definitely learned is just to have as few actual lights as possible. Bouncing off fabrics just feels way more natural and is a lot harder to fuck up. I think I'll have to split this into two parts as it's getting pretty long, but the next episode will be up next week. We're going to part 2. So thanks for watching. I hope this was useful. And if there's anything you'd like me to focus on more next week, please let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it.